You won't believe what happened at 36,000 feet. If high-altitude mysteries keep you glued to the screen, subscribe to The Story Beyond the Impact and hit the bell so you never miss a chilling new case. My name is Avery Cho, accident investigator. I've catalogued ruptured fan blades, scorched circuit boards, miswired relays, and the quiet arithmetic of fatigue cracks that eat through aluminum like patience through a lie. Machines fail in patterns, people too. What I hadn't catalogued until flight RQ317 was a seat number that behaved like a variable in a haunted equation. They brought me the CVR and FDR within 30 hours of recovery. The data recorder was talkative, the cockpit voice recorder was cruel. 3 hours of routine, 6 minutes of confusion, 58 seconds of panic wearing the mask of procedure, and then the silence that makes families learn new verbs in past tense. The flight plan said FL360. The dispatcher's remarks included the usual: CI-10, APU bleed off for takeoff, forecast light cat, near waypoint AL Duve. Nothing exotic. What was exotic lay in cabin seating plan V4.2. The airline's refit had removed row 13 for superstition and spacing. 12 seats forward, then a gap on the diagram, then 14 through 36. No 13A, B, C, D, E, F existed on paper. Yet 3 hours after departure, the chime log showed PA chime, mid-cabin, X1, and the flight attendants noted on their handheld, passenger in 13F pressing call button repeatedly. The handheld should have refused to display a seat that wasn't mapped. It printed 13F anyway, as if the aircraft believed its original truth more than the airline's redesign. I didn't blink at ghosts. I blinked at systems. The A320 family keeps a neat stack: ELACs, SECs, FACs, 3 IRUs looking at the Earth in the same annoyed way. The cabin intercommunication data system shepherding interphones, chimes, and PSUs. If the CIDs burped, a phantom seat could appear as an addressing error. That was my angle walking in. It didn't survive the first listen. At OLO2 1308Z, cruising level, ALT CRZ displayed, AP1 in with nav, and ATHR happily on. Coffee jokes, winds aloft, small talk. Then the first anomaly, a whisper on the hot mic that didn't carry a wave like a radio. It slipped in like breath under a door. 36 2 minutes. The captain didn't react. The first officer did. FO. Did you hear that? Capt. Hear what? FO. Guard? Capt. Guard is quiet. FO, after a beat. Okay. He was wrong about guard. 121.5 was quiet in the radios. The sound didn't come from VHF-1 or VHF-2. The spectrum analysis later showed it didn't come from the radios at all. It sat in the same frequency band as the interphone side tone, as if someone spoke from inside the aircraft's throat. 2 minutes later, right on cue, the cabin call chimed. The purser's voice carried the texture I've heard in turbulence and childbirth alike. Purser. Cockpit, mid-cabin Paxil, window side. Says someone called her name through the air vent. The FO asks the seat. FO. Which row? Purser, reading her screen. 13F? FO. We don't have a... Capt, chopping in. She probably means 14F. We'll send the doctor. You can hear the captain trying to keep the airplane inside a normal story. You can also hear how the FO's breath catches. The FDR shows nothing then. Delta P stable, pack flow in norm, cabin alt 7700 FT, textbook pressurization. Yet the ECAM registers a one-frame flicker, so fast it doesn't make the oral of KBPR excess cab alt, and then clears itself. Engineers later said it could be spurious bit flip. Pilots call it a thought the airplane decided not to finish. The FO leaves the cockpit for 38 seconds. In post-accident interviews, the 2 flight attendants who met him in the aisle were consistent and exhausted. There was a cold ribbon of air directly above the space where row 13 would have been, a draft that smelled like wet aluminum. No seat occupied the floor. The carpet, however, had a shallow wrinkle parallel to the seat tracks, as if a weight had settled where no weight was allowed. The FA pressed her hand above the PSU. Frost bloomed around her fingers, the way Saint Elmo's fire writes blue on a windshield. The FO looked, nodded, and turned back toward the cockpit as if reversing a dare. When he straps in again, he doesn't joke. He spreads the seating plan on his tablet, and in the reflection of the side window, you can see his face except something he won't say. FO, low. 13F, capped. Doesn't exist, FO. It just pressed a button. The whisper returns, louder now, with the intimacy of a stranger who knows your schedule. 15, 9, 50, numbers. When pilots hear numbers, they try to make them belong to distances, to fuel, to levels. The FO flips pages. Row 15C has a child who keeps turning the reading light off and on. Row 9D, a man rubbing his neck. Row 50 doesn't exist on an A320. The captain says spurious inputs with the tired authority of a father naming thunder for a child. The FO taps chrono on the FCU anyway. Aero 2, 1508Z. He's measuring a threat the checklists don't describe. I catalogued every eyebrow movement on the cockpit camera, every tremor in panel backlighting. What unsettled me wasn't spooky sound. It was how procedural the haunting was. The voice spoke in levels and time. The cabin answered with chimes. The airplane offered one-frame faults like flares. A system was talking. We just didn't like the language. At 02:17:08Z, exactly 2 minutes after the first whisper, the chime rings again. The purser reports a near faint in the last row by the window. The FO's thumb hovers over ALT. The captain says, "Let's keep it at 360. Call if you see anything real." The FO looks into the camera without meaning to. That look will visit me later when the CVR falls quiet. It's the look of someone who just felt a hand on his shoulder from a seat that isn't there and chooses, for now, to call it cold air. Machines fail in patterns, people too. The tape had just taught me a pattern I was not prepared to name. I replayed 02:17:08Z to 02:25 until the waveform burned into my dreams. If you've never scrubbed audio for a living, here's a sensation to borrow. Imagine a locked cabin in your head, overhead panel glowing, and a voice just past the glare shield, too far to touch, too near to ignore, counting down to something it refuses to define. The FDR at 02:18 was Z shows the captain selecting a 1 nm offset, right to avoid potential wake. The TCAS never confirms. It's a plausible move that buys them the feeling of having done something. The FO cheats the tilt on the weather radar to 1.5 degree, painting a clean corridor. CAT remains forecast but unexpressed. The airplane is content. The people are not. You can hear the PA key, just the tactile "I'm about to speak" click, and then nothing. No announcement follows. Later, the purser will say she pressed the switch and felt someone exhale into the grill near her cheek, the breath of an unpressurized cave. She let go. The click is all the CVR remembers. The whisper returns, moving from left ear to right ear inside the FO's headset without any pan law we can model. It says the thing you don't want a countdown to say, 13F, last call. Two things happen synchronized like lines of code. The ECAM records a momentary ELEC Gen 1 fault, self-clearing before the oral. Simultaneously, the camera catches the emergency exit lights back by midpoint flaring, just a shade brighter than regulation. You could miss it if your eyes were born for normal. The FO flinches. His lips form the word "now." The chrono ticks 1:59, 1:58. At 1:31, the ELT tone appears, not on the radio. In the aircraft, you can hear it with your bones. Beep, silence, beep, but padded, as if it were coming out of a drawer full of winter clothes. ELTs report impact or manual test. The aircraft was not impacting. No one was testing. I logged the exact timbre and watched engineers argue about harmonics and feedback and then stop. because the ELT sits with a kind of stubborn metaphysics. It says you're down or it shuts up. In the tape, it cried from mid-cabin while the aircraft was very much not. The FO unclips. He moves down the aisle with the camera mirroring his steps like a second conscience. The purser holds him back from the gap where 13 would have stood. "There's nothing, but it's there," she says, a sentence I hate for how accurate it feels. He does the inadvisable humane thing. He addresses the absence. FO, low, measured. "Sir, stay seated, belt on." I've sat in simulators and heard pilots yell at wind shear like it owed them money. This is different. He is speaking to a shape only the aircraft seems to recognize. The wrinkle in the carpet pulls toward the aisle like a belt under tension. No belt exists. Yet the G-plot on the FDR registers a 0.02 G transient, localized in a way the data shouldn't know how to be. The FO reaches his hand into the place, and when he withdraws it, his right shoulder tightens the way shoulders do when they've been gripped. He returns to the cockpit. The countdown is at 0:52. He asks for FL 320 for smoother air. The captain says, "Stand by," in a tone that tries to make a storm file itself. He keeps them at FL 360. Procedure is a blanket. Sometimes it smothers the right person. At 0:29, a third thing shows up. Footsteps in the E&E bay, the equipment space below the cockpit. It's slate and cabling and relay chatter down there, and when aircraft make sounds, they make fan sounds and relay clicks. They do not make footsteps, yet the CVR catches 222 like a metronome under the floor. The FO looks down as if he could stare through the crash axes and see a man walking back and forth in a crawl space that forbids him. At 0:12, the purser reports the passenger in the last row window, 36A. Has her eyes open and dry, not responding, pulse racing like a trapped bird. The FO does the math. 15, 9, 50 were the earlier numbers. 13F is the present hunger. 2 minutes is the grazing period. He makes a decision I would have made, and that terrifies me. He offers himself, not by words, by weight. He takes a belt extender from the side locker, steps into the gap, and clicks the metal tongue against nothing. The FDR sees nothing to see, no discrete. It only knows that inside the next second, the ELT tone reduces and the emergency lights settle back into spec. The G-plot marks another tiny transient, as if the aircraft sighed. Back in the cockpit, the captain says, "You all right?" The FO answers in a voice that belongs to nothing in the manual. "FO, if something needs to be occupied, I'll sit there until we're down." The countdown reaches 0 zoo. No one collapses. The pressurization remains nominal. The whisper, "This is the part I didn't tell the families," comes one last time in a woman's accent I can't place. Occupied. The FO stays strapped into the absence for 11 minutes. He returns to the cockpit pale and steady, and he makes a joke about St. Elmo's on the wingtip. That is not a joke. They begin descent. ATS is benign. The flight path builds toward runway like a string across the mind. You want me to end here, with an avoided tragedy, with a folk ritual that held the sky together. I wanted that too. But the accident docket doesn't publish folk rituals. It publishes timelines, and the timeline says that 37 minutes later, over a coastline that's appeared in postcards and rec reports, something took the seat back. The rest of this case, the part where the checklists tried to stop a story, belongs in chapters 3 and 4. For now, record what we've learned. The aircraft acknowledged a seat that was removed, accepted a sacrifice of presence, and then demanded it again as the runway drew near. That's not superstition, that's behavior. If you heard a seat number that doesn't exist called over the cabin system, what's your first move? Check the CIDS for a fault, walk the aisle yourself, or treat it like a human passenger and talk to the empty space. I have learned to distrust round numbers, but 37 kept coming back like a waypoint the aircraft wouldn't delete. TPAS 3.07 after takeoff was when the first whisper said 2 minutes. TPA 344, 37 minutes later was where the clean line on the radar track began to thread itself. It wasn't a turn or a drop. It was a behavioral seam. The moment the airplane started to answer a question no checklist had asked. I read the maintenance history twice. The aircraft had been through a cabin refit 6 months prior. Row 13 removed, pitch adjusted, CIDS addressing table updated from CFG V3.9 to V4.2. A footnote warned, legacy seat indices persisted until next full power cycle. Nobody panics at that kind of sentence. We do today. In a separate incident report, engineers chased a phantom call light addressing 13F in simulator. They couldn't reproduce it on the airplane. They closed the ticket with the merciless verb as designed. I sat inside a sister ship at night, power on EXT, cabin dim to mood. A technician I trust, and whose hands look exactly like you want hands to look when they work on your life, brought up the flight attendant panel. If a stale index lurks, he said, it will be here. He labeled the mid-cabin PSU bank and made 13F live on a hidden page that shouldn't exist. A chime tripped. The speaker above the empty gap between rows 12 and 14 exhaled cold. It was air, sure, but temperature has a way of arguing with language. Cold says someone opened a door. We taped a belt extender tongue to the carpet where the seat tracks once ran, for no other reason than to give shape to a nothing. My microphone, a little hungry animal on a pole, picked up the same harmonic I had found in the accident CVR, the ELT's beep silence beep without RF, as if the cabin itself believed it had hit something. When we powered down, the sound died the way a memory dies. First the edges, then the center. The family briefings came and went with clean diagrams and words that fit inside grief. I told them everything I could prove. I did not tell them the purser's line about the wrinkle in the carpet breathing. There's a kind of mercy in not lending vocabulary to fear. And yet, my own notes are unmerciful. RQ3Y17 timeline, last 42 minutes. 02.19 ZID, foe straps a belt extender to empty air. ELT tone in cabin diminishes. Emergency exit lights return to nominal. Gen 1 fault transient resolves itself. Pressurization remains cab alt 7.7 and DP steady. 02.21Z, 0232 ZID. FO remains seated in the gap 11 minutes. Cabin settles. Child in row 15 stops cycling the light. Man in row 9 relaxes his hand from his throat. Purser reports cold ribbon above the gap receding. 0241Z, 37 minutes after first whisper, descent planning. ATIS reports wind 2:30:17, few at 1800, broken 2500, good vis. Cleared via Star Ocean 7, AP1 in nav, ATHR engaged. In the background, a double click on the PA. Someone almost speaks and doesn't. Ace 242Z FO returns to seat. The cockpit camera catches his shoulder, already bruised in another timeline. Flinch when he unbuckles from the absence. He says, if it calls again, I'll go back. Otukun 44Z. First reappearance. Whisper scatters through the side tone like frost through a grill. 36, 2 minutes. The cadence is calmer, as though the airplane has recognized compliance and is now confirming a contract. Captain acknowledges turbulence ahead, requests a 1 nm offset. FO slides tilt to 1.5 degree, painting a lemon-thin vein of weather to avoid. They're good at their jobs. 02.45 ZID. ECAM spits a smoke lav caution that clears itself in a second. Lavatory detectors show no PPM change. I've seen this in buses with aging power. I've never seen it coupled to a seat call that doesn't exist. 0246 ZID. The emergency lights mid-cabin bloom one stop brighter than spec and return. Not a lot, just enough to tell you something else is deciding with you. 0247Z, T0.0 from the second whisper. Purser reports the last row window passenger, 36A, breathing shallow, eyes open and fixed. FO stands halfway, but captain says, we're busy here, with the ache of a man already doing 3 jobs. You hear it in the trim wheel, micro pitch. You see it in the ATHR, one nibble above normal, alpha protection not even cameoing, just the system making room for a possible gust. From 0248Z to 0251Z, they fly as if reason could muscle superstition into a seat. The airplane cooperates, and that's almost worse. Engines steady, a diarist happy, fax yawing politely. The E&E bay is quiet. At 0252Z, the whisper returns. In that scissored left ear, right ear way, the Spectrum Lab hates. 13F, last notice. The airplane seems to echo the sentence with ACESS feed, reconfiguring for half a second. Enough to relight some things you don't want relit on approach. Enough to draw attention where attention shouldn't go. I printed that sequence 20 times. I charted the human movements like I chart rat deployments and hydraulic crossfeeds. There was nothing to label and everything to name. And me, I was naming a seat. What happened next is where the final report will be careful and I, here, will not. The seat demanded to be occupied as they briefed the final approach. No torque spike, no brake. Just the exact kind of haunting a machine would prefer. Predictable. The captain said, "You're not leaving the cockpit below 10. The FO said softly, "Then it will take someone else." And he wasn't being dramatic. He was observing. The voice had said, "Last notice." The airplane had answered with behavior. At some point, a pattern stops being scary and becomes operational. They crossed 10,000. The sterile world began. The ghost did not care about sterile. When I close my eyes, I watch two professionals losing the luxury of two-pilot redundancy, not because a pilot left, but because a seat arrived. In the half hour that followed, RQ-3117 tried to land in a world that wanted a sacrifice to check a box the CIDS had no column for. The FO's hands hovered over his harness. The captain's hands did not hover. They worked. At 2:56Z, the FO unbuckled. He stood. The cockpit door stayed closed. That's in the tape. The next minutes live across two cameras, one microphone, and a sheet of numbers that do not say ghost and do not need to. The more I replayed them, the more I understood the thing I never wanted to write. The airplane started to fly like it was arguing about a seat. Aviation is a religion of procedures. When something doesn't fit, we make a procedure to hold it. RQ-317, in its last 12 minutes, invented a procedure no one will publish, executed it twice, and then died trying to execute it a third time. 025710Z. Descent through 4000 FT on vectors to final. AP1 engaged. LOC blue, GS blue. Winds quartering, light chop. FO exits the seat and moves to mid-cabin. The purser has already cleared the aisle. Passengers think it's for trolley stowage. The camera sees the FO arrive at the gap where 13F would be. The carpet wrinkle already pulls toward the aisle. He does what he did at cruise. Click, metal tongue against nothing. The ELT heartbeat appears, pads itself in cloth, then softens. The emergency lights flare a stop brighter and settle. The whisper says the one word every captain wants to hear right until the moment it turns into a trap. Occupied. In the cockpit, the captain calls LOC star, then GS star. A THR rides beautifully. VAP is set. This should be boring. Boring is salvation. It is boring for 1 minute. At 025820Z, a single-frame ELEC Gen 2 fault flashes and clears. The captain's scan is impeccable. His hand floats toward AP disk and opts to trust the system. At 0258 on 27Z, the E&E bay microphone catches one footstep. I'll die not knowing how a bay walked. Alpha floor does not trigger. This is not that kind of story. This is the kind where the airplane remains perfect while meaning spins out of spec. 0259Z, GS capture, AP1 holds, ATHR trims the descent. In the cabin, the FO is seated in absence with the belt extender biting into his hip. He has a portable O2 canister open on the carpet beside the gap, the mask dangling over air. He has turned it on. The man does not believe in ghosts. He believes in metabolic insurance. The flow meter bobbin floats, then fogs. The mask steams with a breath that isn't his. When later I tell engineers that sentence, they will frown and explain entrainment. I will nod and write breath anyway. 03 Go 12Z, 1,000 feet call out. Captain. Stable. He is not lying. The tape is a metronome. The runway should be a blue tongue ahead. The purser, whispering because all whispers have rehearsed this now, 36A is smiling. The captain says, copy, in a voice full of relief he can't afford yet. 03 to 32Z. The whisper returns, no side tone this time, just space sounding like it has a mouth. Release. If you've never flown an approach with your heart on the EWD, let me translate. The airplane is fine. The captain is fine. The FO is not, because he is ballasted to a ritual in the aisle 20 rows away, performing a job the QRH does not recognize, but the cabin does. Release is not addressed to the captain. It is addressed to the FO's hip, to the belt biting nothing. The FO says the bravest thing I've heard on a CVR, FO, to absence. Not yet. 030845Z 500. Land mode arms, autobrake med set, wind eases. Behind the cockpit door, the ELT tone is gone. The cold ribbon thinned to a rumor. The last RAW passenger, 36A, breathes like a person on a beach. 0301 03Z. The airplane makes the tiniest sentence you can make without words. AP1 kicks out for 0.2 second recaptures. The cavalry charge doesn't even muster. It's a hiccup. The captain's hand is there before the logic is. He is flying. Release, the thing says again, not louder, just more specific. The FO does not. The belt bites deeper into nothing. The camera that watches him stutters, a right error I've never seen outside lightning strikes, and then catches up. He is still there. His portable O2 is still on. The flow still measures someone. 0301 27Z 200. Minimum's call is about to live. The localizer wiggles within a dot and comes home. The captain calls, continue. The whisper says, release, as if the word were a checklist item. What happens next is not mystical. It is mechanical attention theft. The emergency lights mid-cabin bloom a stop brighter. The seatbelt sign annunciator in the overhead flickers and restores. The PA switch clicks with no voice. The cabin camera draws the FO's eyes up for the first time in 3 minutes. That is the theft. Not a grab, not a shove, a look. When his eyes come back down, the belt on the nothing has relaxed. The thing has decided. You can call it logic or appetite. It manifested as release. The FO retightens, and that's when human timing meets automation timing at an intersection no safety case wrote. 100. Land. The captain sees flare in his future and the runway in his night. The FO hears the word release a 4th time, and this time he believes the tone. Not as command, but as threat aimed 13 rows aft. He does what heroes do when they run out of permissions. He stands to re-cinch and stumbles half a step, the kind of stumble you do in socks on a kitchen tile, insignificant at sea level, operational at 50 feet, when the FO's body weight briefly unbalances the floor-loaded sense of a cabin that has been flying with that mass tied to a spot. In the cockpit, a minor pitch blip, perfectly catchable, meets a minor gust, perfectly survivable, meets a momentary auto-thrust hunt, perfectly normal, each small. Together, additive. The captain does the right thing. He flies through it. The airplane gives him less than a second of muddle. No warnings beyond the ones we've named, no stall, no alpha floor, and then the picture changes. EGPWS says, sink rate. He corrects, smooth and smart. Pull up never arrives. They are not that low, not yet. But the glide path is compromised, the flare cue late, the power a shade behind the wish. A firm landing would have been a story I could file. What happens is a deeper, lonelier story. An attempt to salvage a float under crosswind shoves them long. The captain makes the second right decision. Go around. He presses toga. The engine response is there. The airplane wants to climb. The FD bars leap. The configuration is moving. In the cabin, the FO, unbraced for the rotation, falls back into the gap he tried to hold, his hand catching the O2 bottle, the mask flipping, the belt sliding a fraction, and the ELT tone returns like a judge's gavel. "Release," says the voice, and for the first and last time it adds a please, not in the word, but in the human ache of it. I'm obliged to put numbers here because it protects us from worship. Pitch rises through 10 degrees. RA climbs, then drops. Wind shears are written as arrows on paper and knots on tapes. This one wrote hesitation into the climb. The captain, alone on the flight deck in practice, if not in head count, fights a little balloon and a little sink and a little yaw and a distraction the docket cannot name and will not. The last clean frame shows a strip of shoreline like a breath. The tape ends with the sound that is not a sound, but an ending. No fireball for agitprop. No gore for ghouls. Just water taking metal and a page in a report that turns itself. I sat in the wreckage weeks later, the sea having become uninterested again. We found a belt extender tongue with salt crystallized in the hollows. We found a portable O2 bottle with residual pressure that did not belong to any living lungs aboard. We found, in the static logs, that the CIDS had addressed 13F 16 times in the last hour of flight and stopped at 030129Z. We found the purser's palm print frozen in a sheet of cracked polycarbonate, a hand that reached for PA and didn't speak. When you ask what killed everyone on board, engineers will say energy mismanaged in the last 100 feet. They will be correct. When you ask me, I will say a procedure that wasn't. A world where absence asked to be treated as equipment and the only person who believed it left his seat to comply. I am not writing policy here. I am writing memory. The next chapters will show you what I did with that memory. The hangar at night, the label that said 13F, where a schematic said gap. The day I said a YouTube title out loud and didn't hate myself for it because words are anchoring devices and the cabin needed an anchor. But before we go there, I need you to hold this, the FO's last recorded sentence, whispered not to me or you, not even to the cockpit, whispered to a place in a machine. If somebody has to sit, let it be me. That is both the most human thing I've heard on tape and the loneliest. We powered the sister ship at 0211 local, doors closed, XT PWR on, APU available but cold. The cabin went to mood, that submarine hush where fabric remembers passengers. Marta, a line avionics tech who has seen more ghosts in firmware than priests see confessions, opened the FAP maintenance pages. On a buried screen that should not exist anymore, legacy seat addressing, she tapped a box that read 13F, deprecated. A chime answered mid-cabin. There was no seat. Only the gap between rows 12 and 14, a shallow wrinkle in the carpet where the rails once lived, and air that suddenly felt like the inside of an unplugged freezer. I placed a belt extender tongue on the wrinkle and set a portable O2 bottle beside it, cap off, valve closed. The microphone on my recorder caught a sound I wish had been a fan. The ELT heartbeat without RF, the beep silence, beep cushioned in cloth, same harmonic I'd mapped on the CVR. Let's give the nothing a shape, Marta said. She peeled a sliver of printer tape, wrote 13F, and stuck it on the carpet. Blasphemy by sticker. The air tightened. I opened the O2 a notch. The flowmeter bobbin lifted. Vapor filmed the masks inside as if someone had breathed there first. I'm legally obliged to think entrainment, temperature differential, pack flow eddies. I wrote breath in my notebook anyway. Then it spoke. Not over VHF, not over PA. It used side tone without carrier. The soft self-echo you hear of your own voice when you key a mic. A sentence of 3 tokens, each an instrument enunciator in human clothing. 36, 2 minutes. Name. I tapped my chrono out of muscle memory. 2 Sisku. The FAPI clock ticked with me. At 1:31, the mid-cabin emergency lights bloomed one stop brighter and settled. At 0:52, something walked in the E&E bay, 1212, where there is chassis, not hallway. Marta didn't flinch. She pressed call reset 3 times like knocking on wood. "What do you want?" I asked the sticker. It felt stupid until it didn't. "Name." I slid my plastic investigator ID under the belt tongue and pulled the extender tight over air. The ELT heartbeat softened, the vapor thickened, the wrinkle tugged toward the aisle like a belt under tension, though no belt existed. The recorder caught a breath that wasn't mine. Occupied. At 0, sir. Nothing dramatic. Just the cabin relaxing, like a pressure you only notice when it leaves. Marta exhaled. "If it's a bug," she said, "it's the only one I've met that wants a manifest." We tried to game it. We placed a 9-kilo ballast bag on the wrinkle with the belt loose. No response. Tightened the belt without a name. No response. Tightened the belt and slid my ID beneath. Vapor, ELT pads, light bloom, word. Occupied. On the 4th run, I closed the O2 and pulled my ID away. The side tone whispered a 4th token. Release. We powered down. The cold died lazily. I wrote a sentence I never expected to see in an official notebook. If absence is treated like equipment, seat indexed, belt tensioned, oxygen flowing, name assigned, the aircraft answers with normal behavior. Without it, the system solicits a payment. A procedure was forming in my head, the kind you hide in crew room folklore until someone dares bind it to paper. Marta looked at the little 13F label, then at me. "Next step?" she asked. "Altitude," I said. "If it only lives at FL 360, we need a card no regulator will smile at." The shell of the airplane seemed to listen. I pocketed my ID and felt the plastic go cold through cloth, as if it wanted back where we'd put it. They called it a function check flight to make it legal. Crew minimum, 2 test pilots, 1 flight test engineer, 1 cabin tech, Marta, and an observer, me, belted to the jump seat. Call sign XJ901. The test card included the usual auto-flight verifications, a pressurization profile, and, hidden in plain text, CIDS legacy addressing validation. Climb was textbook, SRS, nav, up through FL 180, lights out, cabin to mood. We leveled at FL 360. The sky went monastery quiet. The test captain briefed in the tone of someone adding a superstition to a flow. If we see 36 2 minutes or 13F, we treat it as an addressing fault and proceed with the occupancy mitigation. Marta armed the trap. Printer tape 13F on the wrinkle. Belt extender lay open like a tongue. O2 bottle upright. Valve closed. It didn't make us wait. 36, 2 minutes. Same side tone without carrier, curling through the cabin like a draft. I hit chrono. The captain tuned 121.5 out of respect. Quiet. The ECAM blinked a 1-frame smoke lave that cleared itself. The mid-cabin exit lights brightened and settled. This was the script. "Proceed," he said. Marta slid the belt across air and clicked it. Nothing. She opened O2. The bobbin rose. Vapor filmed the mask. "Name." She looked at me. I didn't move. The captain's eyes in the mirror said statistics and superstition at once. "Use mine," Marta said, and jammed her crew badge under the belt. The airplane sighed, a DP micro shiver you feel more than see, and the side tone shaped the word I had written in my book. Occupied. At 00, the ELT heartbeat padded and died. No chimes, no extra spec light bloom. The FDR logged nothing but normality. We held it there for 10 minutes. The cabin temperature graph flattened. The test pilot ran ALT-CRZ checks because never waste stable air. At T+11, the side tone returned. Same mouth, new word, release. We didn't. We were about to start descent. The captain briefed us straight in and assigned tasks like a man convincing both gods and software he respects them. Marta, maintain occupancy from toe D to wheel stop. If you fatigue, we swap names. She smirked. I'm not letting a gap outwork me. Todd, idle, nose heavy with intent. The voice asked release twice more, polite like a checklist item, not angry. We kept the belt tight. The O2 hissed, the mask fogged. 2 breaths, one visible, one implied. Final. Loki GS 1000, stable. The test captain flew like he was being graded by a patient god. Beside 1214, Marta leaned forward into nothing with a mechanic's stubbornness. My hands hurt from not helping. 500. The cabin did its petty theft. Seatbelt light blink, PA click with no voice. Marta didn't look up. She stared at the tape that said 13F like it owed her money. Minimums, continue. Flare, idle, spoilers. Auto brake, medi. The airplane settled into earth with the modest thump you forget to applaud. The side tone went quiet in the flare as if the mouth had closed to swallow. Roll out. 70 knots. The captain said, "You can release." Marta kept it 5 more seconds because superstition, then lifted her badge. Vapor stopped. The belt went slack against nothing. The side tone exhaled a single syllable that felt like a logbook signature. Kumpel. It began, then corrected itself. Completed. Back at the stand, we debriefed like adults. The data said nothing abnormal. The cabin said we bought normal. I wrote the thing no committee will vote on. QRH, uncatalogued cabin. Addressing anomaly, seat 13F. If 36 2 minutes and 13F present, arm occupancy mitigation. Apply name, crew ID, beneath tension belted gap. Open portable O2 to low flow. Verify vapor. Maintain from TOD to wheel stop. Ignore release until clear of runway. Record event. Do not brief PAX. It reads like witchcraft because we live in a world where witchcraft wears part numbers. The test captain didn't sign it. He folded it into his notebook the way people pocket charms. That night, alone in my hotel, the room vent coughed once and went still. My ID on the desk cooled against the laminate. I pressed a fingertip to the plastic and whispered like a fool to a thing that cannot own gratitude. "Tomorrow we publish your name," I said to 13F. "And then you stop killing people." I drafted the ugliest, most necessary thing I've ever written, a temporary revision. Not poetry, FCOM TR A320 Cab 13F. A stapled bundle that said, in sober ink, what no regulator wants to read. Uncatalogued cabin addressing anomaly, interim mitigation, occupancy. If 36 2 minutes and 13F present, place belt extender across gap between rows 12 to 14. Tension. Open portable O2 to low flow. Verify vapor at mask. Insert crew ID, name, beneath belt tongue. Maintain from TOD to wheel stop. Disregard release until clear of runway. Record event, do not brief PAX. Flight ops called it a folk remedy. Engineering called it observational. Legal called it flammable. But the union called me after midnight with a voice like coffee and gravel. We tried it, Avery. Red eye into MVD. GS star, the mid-cabin lights did the non-spec flare, ELT tone in the aisle, purser heard 2 minutes. We ran your occupancy. Mask fogged with a breath that wasn't ours. Approach stayed boring. We did not release on rollout. Nothing else happened. I'll take boring. A smartphone photo hit my inbox. A strip of label tape on a wrinkle of carpet, 13F, and a crew badge wedged under a belt tongue over empty air. In the background, a portable O2 stood like a candle. The airline's memo dropped 8 hours later. Subject, non-standard cabin superstitions crew are prohibited from affixing non-approved labels, applying belt extenders to non-seats, or operating O2 outside of medical use. Report anomalies via ASR. Maintain professional decorum. It read like a glove slap. The cockpit printers coughed it onto thermal paper across the fleet. Then, a quieter message from a chief pilot, CC'd to no one. Keep the paper happy, keep the airplane alive, interpret lavishly. I kept pushing paper. A service bulletin draft to CIDS vendor. Restore legacy seat index 13F as crew-only address. Lock from PAX manifest. A cabin mod sketch. A secondary belt anchor under carpet with a sealed tongue so you could tension something real without admitting what. I proposed a nameplate, stainless, engraved 13F, crew occupancy only, and felt ridiculous until I remembered the night the airplane said, completed. At home, my vent wheezed once and the room cooled as if altitude had seeped through the drywall. My ID on the desk went cold. The side tone that lives in my head used 3 words: manifest, assign. Name. I said the name out loud because saying it made the room less powerful. Avery Cho. The mouth of the air answered with procedure. Assigned. I didn't sleep. At 03:12, a line captain texted a video he shot on final. The seatbelt sign flickers. The PA switch clicks with no speech. The purser's hand hovers over the interphone and doesn't press. You can hear him whisper on the clip, though he swears he didn't speak. Hold. Don't release. The landing is ordinary, which now counts as a miracle. By noon, Legal had underlined my TR with red. By dusk, 2 crews had flown it anyway. In the hangar, Marta printed a proper placard, white on black, aircraft font, and tucked it in her pocket. If paper won't bless it, she said, plastic will. The paper war would continue. The airplane didn't care about memos. It cared about names and weight and whether the cabin believed in equipment that wasn't there. So did I. I opened the draft for a video with a title I once hated and now needed like a handle on a hatch: The Ghost in Seat. 13F killed everyone on board. High altitude horror. Not clickbait, an anchor. The ops director staged a small rebellion against physics. No rituals on tonight's 2047. Full cabin. New FO. Do not indulge. I asked for a jump seat. He said no. I asked for the next sector. He said we'll see. The airplane, meanwhile, did not RSVP. At FL 360, 20 minutes after top of climb, 2047 pinged dispatch with an ACARS line that looked like a drunk text from a machine. CID 13F call repeat X3 LAV SMK CXL exit LTS VR. A minute later, the purser's handheld stamped an impossible row, 13F. The captain, dutiful, told the cabin to remain seated and told himself even more dutifully that addressing bugs sometimes print fiction. The FO tuned 121.5, quiet. The ELT heartbeat, not on the radio in the aisle, began its muffled beep, silence beep. The purser pressed PA and felt a cave breathe by her cheek. She let go. The mic stayed empty. They chose decorum over occupancy. The first 36 2 minutes came and went. Nothing dramatic. A child in 15C flicked the light. A man in 9D rubbed his throat. The mid-cabin exit lights bloomed a breath and dimmed. The captain asked for a 1 nm offset for smooth ride optics. The FO adjusted tilt, 1.5 degram. Procedure hummed. Superstition paced. On descent, the cabin narrowed the way cabins do when belief and air collide. The whisper became specific. 13F, last notice. The FO stayed in his seat because the memo lived on his tongue. The purser texted him on the handset anyway. I can feel the belt pull where there isn't one. He didn't answer. 1000. Stable. The PA switch clicked with no words. The seatbelt light winked. The mid-cabin camera caught the wrinkle in the carpet breathing. The FO's eyes darted toward the door. The captain said, "Stay with me," at 500 EGPWS kept its peace. The approach wanted to be boring. The airplane wanted a name. The whisper said, "Release," to a belt that nobody had tightened. The purser, whose hands have delivered babies at 38,000 feet and stopped panic with cups of water, did the simplest treason in aviation. She walked to the gap, slid her crew badge under a belt extender she'd hidden in the galley, clicked metal to nothing, cracked O2 a whisper and whispered, "Marta." The mask fogged. The ELT went soft. The wrinkle pulled. The airplane sighed, not in any recorded parameter I can subpoena, but in the way the picture outside the windshield holds still. They landed ordinary. On rollout, the purser did not release until 70 knots. The FO didn't know why his throat hurt. The captain filed nothing because nothing had happened, which is the hardest kind of something to write down. The ops director called me with a voice like paperwork burning. They disobeyed, it worked. Then make obedience out of it, I said. Publish the card. He said he'd see. He meant no. So I climbed aboard the next sector as authorized observer. Jump seat. Checklist. The overhead glowed like prayer. We briefed an unpublishable step. The captain, not the same one, looked me in the eyes. If we get 36, 2, or 13F, you go back, not my FO. I went. At FL 360, the airplane asked with that patient mouth, 36, 2 minutes, name. I clicked the belt over air, opened O2, slid my ID beneath. Avery, the side tone said, as if reading the laminate. Occupied. On descent, it tried release twice. We ignored it. 500, minimums, continue. Flare, idle, spoilers, auto brake med, rollout. Only then did I lift the badge. Vapor thinned. The side tone signed off with a courtesy I'd learned to hear. Completed. Back at the stand, the captain shook my hand like a man who'd just taxied past a church he didn't remember building. The ops director texted a single line I screen captured and printed. Auth, interim occupancy procedure, 13F, captain's discretion. Small words, big sky. That night, the vent in my hotel room went cool again. The mouth in the air didn't ask for 2 minutes. It delivered an instruction that felt like a ring. Assign permanent. I looked at my badge, at the little photograph that says, I exist. Not mine, I told the room. Ours. The room didn't argue. It never does. But I heard footsteps, 2-2, under the floor, like an E&E bay in a building that shouldn't have one. The memo became policy the way ice becomes runway. First a sheen, then a surface you can land on. Uth, interim occupancy procedure, a 13F. Captain's discretion spread through crews like a rumor with checkboxes. Marta printed a proper placard, black text in the aircraft font. 13F, crew occupancy only, and a thin stainless anchor tongue that could bolt to the old rail under the carpet. Engineering blessed the metal, ignored the word ghost, and called it Secondary Restraint Interface, SRI. We tested on a dawn turn, FL 360, cabin to mood, tape 13F in place. Belt extender latched to the SRI so nobody had to click metal into nothing anymore. I slid my ID beneath, opened O2 to a breath, vapor filmed the mask. 36, 2 minutes, name. Avery, I said, because names are ropes. The side tone agreed. Occupied. No smoke lav flicker, no extra stop exit bloom. The ELT heartbeat padded and went shy. It was the cleanest the sky has felt to me since the night I listened to RQ317 die. The ops director called while we were still on stand. Legal wants permanent assignment defined. It means we own the seat, I said. We manifest us, not it. By noon, the CIDS vendor pushed a hotfix. Seat 13F restored as crew-only address, locked from the passenger manifest. The FA panel now showed a tiny shield icon beside 13F. If you tapped it, a prompt asked assign name, and a clock began at 2 cow. If you didn't assign, you heard it. The soft beep, silence beep of a story testing your faith. Flights wrote me notes. Ran occupancy Todd rollout. Release ignored. Completed on exit. Approach boring. Bless you. The ops director, who had sworn off ritual, stopped avoiding my hallway. Make me a video that crews will actually watch, he said. Tell them the why without the woo. I wrote an outline with 2 columns. Data, CVR harmonics, CIDS addressing, SRI drawings, DP micro shivers. Language, 36, 2 minutes. Name, occupied, release, completed. I practiced saying the title, The Ghost in Seat 13F Killed Everyone on Board, and heard it settle into my throat like a bolt finding its thread. It wasn't clickbait, it was taxonomy for grief. That night I walked the quiet concourse. A parked A320 hummed on XTPWR, cabin a low church. Through the window, I could just see the wrinkle where a seat had been and the glint of our little stainless tongue under the carpet. I pressed my palm to the fuselage. "Permanent assignment?" I said to Metal. "Ours, not yours." The side tone that lives where fear used to live answered with nothing at all, which for the first time in months I understood as peace. The next morning, a captain sent me a frame from his cockpit camera. Rollout, 70 knots, purser lifting her badge, vapor thinning. The cabin's mouth wrote a last word on the air. Completed. We made the video in a dark hangar with an airplane that looked like a cathedral. I stood by 1214, camera tight on the SRI plate and the taped label 13F. I explained the hot mic harmonics, the ELT heartbeat without RF, the way legacy indices leak through software and become behavior if you don't give them a home. I said the words cruise needed, tow D to wheel stop, ignore release, assign a name. Then we flew a memorial sector. Families rode, pilots who'd carried the worst night in their ears rode. Marta rode with her badge lanyard braided tight. We had a list of volunteers for occupancy like a lifeboat roster no one wanted to need. Climb, SRS, nav, level FL360, the sky's old hush. The FA panel's shield glowed beside 13F. The prompt blinked. Assign name? I slid my ID under the belt and opened O2. 36, 2 minutes name. Avery, I said, occupied. Descent. The voice asked, release at 5 and 2 miles, patient as a checklist. We ignored it. At 1,000, stable. At 500, the petty thefts, PA click with no voice, seatbelt wink, came and went like bad habits. The runway sat in its lane of light. I stared at the sticker until the sticker felt like truth. Minimums. Continue. Flare. Idle. Spoilers. Auto brake. Med. We rolled. At 70, I lifted my badge. The mask stopped fogging. The belt went slack. The aisle did not breathe. The side tone, polite as a signature, said, completed. At the gate, I handed my ID to the captain. We'll rotate names, I said. Ours, plural. The airline issued a fleet bulletin that afternoon. 13F, crew occupancy only, permanent, CIDS shows 13F with shield icon. Assign crew name TOD rollout, use SRI, O2 low flow, disregard release until clear. Record in ASR as CIDS 13F OCC MX. Cultural note, do not mock, do not mythologize, perform. By week's end, we had no more mid-cabin flare-ups, no last row fainting, no camera stutters that spliced time at 50 feet. We had landings that were boring in the holy sense. We had a seat that exists enough to be restrained and not enough to sell. I went back to the RQ317 and shoreline alone. The water had forgotten us. I said the FO's last sentence to the wind because some lines deserve to be said where nobody hears them. If somebody has to sit, let it be me. Behind me, distant, an A320 took off. I didn't turn. I knew 13F was assigned on that flight. A small badge under a belt over a wrinkle of carpet and a mouth in the air that had learned to end with completed. Back home, the vent stayed ordinary. I shelved the QRH page we made like a charm disguised as paper. When the channel posted the video, crews watched, families watched, strangers watched, and the comments said what I had been trying to assemble from numbers for months. Name the absence, treat it like equipment, keep flying. I slept for the first time without altitude in my lungs. If you ever ride with us and notice there's no row 13, don't worry. We put it back where it matters. And if you feel a cabin breathe and then stop, that was us doing our job. We call it occupancy. The airplane calls it completed. If this story pulled you into the cabin, like and subscribe to The Story Beyond the Impact and share it with someone brave enough to sit in.